Welcome to Mastering the Art of Success. I'm your host, Debbie DiMaggio. We are here today with Crispin Thompson, aka Chris. He is here from San Antonio, Texas. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you so much, Debbie. Happy to be here.
So glad to have you. It's so funny as we were just getting it ready for the show. I hired a publicist once for 3 months, and she asked me to write her a testimonial. And I said, it's like waking up on being a child on Christmas morning, waking up on Christmas morning every morning because I never know what she had in store for me. If it was an interview, if she, whatever she had me do, it was always something I didn't expect and I had never done. And so, what I love about my podcast is I've read your bio, but I know nothing and I'm going to learn it all. And so today, as we speak, just on the fly, and I just love these conversations I have with my guests. So I'm super excited to have you today.
No, it'll be
So,
great. I love these things, so let's do it.
all right. Crispin Thompson has spent more than 25 years shaping how people lead, communicate, and grow. In senior roles at Hewlett Packard Enterprise, TaskUs, and QSC, he managed large international teams and drove major transformation programs, experiences that revealed how easily careers stall when strong managers are promoted without the confidence or presence to step up into leadership. That observation became the foundation for the Leadership Studio, where Crispin helps leaders bridge the gap between how they see themselves and how others experience them. His coaching focuses on practical shifts that carry real weight in the room, learning to project calm under pressure, making decisions when information is incomplete, and moving past the perfectionism that undermines confidence. He often draws on his own missteps or on vivid historical examples, turning abstract ideas into stories and exercises that leave a lasting mark. Leading multicultural teams across Mexico, Poland, Romania, India, and the US also shaped his perspective. He saw firsthand how cultural nuance can either unlock connection or create disconnection, and how organizations that neglect leadership development outside headquarters risk losing trust and talent. That global view continues to inform his work alongside his service on the Make a Wish Central and South Texas Governing Board, which deepened his belief that leadership is ultimately about service. Alongside his coaching and speaking, Crispin has built AI powered tools that extend the impact of his work. What began as a way to ease his own workload has evolved into apps that analyze resumes, support leadership assessments, and help clients reflect and prepare between sessions. They are designed with the same ethos that drive his coaching: strip away barriers, provide clarity, and keep the focus on what matters most: leaders showing up with confidence and authenticity. That is wonderful. Wow. So tell us I'm very visual and I like to look at and see your life's journey. Where did you start? Did you start in Texas? Where did you start? And did you know what you do today that you would eventually do that like when you were a younger person? Did you know you were going to end up where you are today?
Not even a little bit. So my journey from kind of youth to today was interesting in the sense that we moved a lot. So I was born in Louisiana. My family's from Louisiana. In fact, you don't hear it in the accent, but I would say my family is a deeply Southern family and deeply Louisiana and 300 something years in Louisiana, which is a
Wow.
long time to be in one place. But we moved a lot. So we and I always get the question, was my dad in the military? That's like usually the first
Yes.
question. And he wasn't, but he was an Air Force brat. And so I think it was partially that was sort of just in his blood, but his his role kind of allowed him to kind of change locations, and obviously we went with him. So in my youth, we moved a lot. So I lived in Louisiana, obviously, and Arkansas, and Mississippi, and Tennessee, and then Texas, and then Illinois, and Indiana. So kind of a lot of places I went to because of all the moves. I ended up going to 11 schools, which on the one hand sounds just overwhelming, and then for sure at times, sort of like statistically, I was always the new kid, right? Just there's only 12 years, and then I moved 11 schools, but sometimes that meant two schools in one year, and sometimes it meant no changes for a few years. And for me, I think one of the shaping functions of that was that it created an adaptability in me. And always being the new kid, always having, let's say, an interesting name. Crispin is not super common, right? And this is the 80s, right? So I think kids were maybe a little meaner back then. So I always it sort of toughened me up a little bit, I think, in a very positive way. Created adaptability. As I was coming through school, I studied history, which obviously was clearly not kind of setting me up for life in corporate America or anything. And I had a just kind of a job after school, and a bunch of my colleagues and things started leaving and going to this other company that I'd never heard of, a company called Vanstar, which does not exist any longer. And it sounded like a delivery service or something. I didn't know anything about it, and it was a technology company. They sold technology to other companies, and so I went there and I started in sales. And again, it was just a job. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I just knew that this was a job that was going to compensate me better than I was and was going to give me weekends off, which I didn't have. And so those were, when you're 20 years old, those are two amazing things, right? So that
Right.
was fantastic. And what started as a job that was purely made for kind of life and compensation decisions, burgeoned into a career because over time that company was acquired by another company, Intercom, which was later acquired by Compaq, which was later acquired by Hewlett Packard. And then 10 years ago, Hewlett Packard split into two different companies, one of which was Hewlett Packard Enterprise. So for me, for a job that started as this is just more money, it ended up being a very flourishing 25-year career that took me from the very entry level of an inside salesperson all the way to an executive role leading a very large and I would say important organization. And and so for me, there was and great opportunities. I think if you're for sure if you're young and you're willing to raise your hand and hopefully have some degree of talent to back that up, there's lots of opportunities in big companies, and one of those was I was able to rotate to Europe for a little while, and I went and lived in the UK, and I did that for about a year, and that experience kind of shaped my worldview a little bit, and being just super American and having no passport before I started, I literally had I was told I was going to go, and then I had to go to an office in Chicago, like a physical State Department office, to get an emergency passport, and then 2 weeks later, I was in Scotland. Right? It was super, and that's the kind of thing I just wouldn't do today. But again, when you're 25 or however old I was, it's just, oh, that's just the next thing. We'll just do it. And so these experiences shaped me, kind of seeing how business was done in other countries. I'm very fascinated by language and by accents. And so living in a place like the UK was amazing because there are such amazing distinct accents. And the UK compared to America is obviously small. It's the size of one of our states, but you could drive 25, 30 minutes in any one direction and have a very distinctly different accent to your ear. So that was I loved that, and then got to travel across to different countries and came back, and over the course of my years, my career shifted from sales into more kind of like field operations, and then into more strategy. I would say a third or more of my career was in strategy type roles, and then integrations and uh, just transformation kind of stuff, buzzwords of today. And then I ran a big operations organization at the end. And you asked, did I always know if I was going to do this? For sure, I didn't at the beginning. There was no direction. It was just paycheck. And what I found was there were certain things that really gave me energy. One of those things was coaching others, because there were a lot of things, especially around leadership and communication, that I was anything but good at in the beginning. And so finding my own voice, finding my own confidence, I felt like how I had to work through some of those things on my own gave me credibility in conversation to others. And so I started doing more of these kind of career conversations or career development, leadership development type things, kind of as I would call it my work hobby at HP, right? So I
Yeah.
would
Yes.
doing these things on the side, and I reached a level where maybe no one was going to tell me to do this because it wasn't a part of my job responsibilities, but also no one was going to tell me not to do it. And I really enjoyed it. I had a lot of very positive feedback from the individuals and groups that I worked with. And so the seed became planted there that maybe this is something I want to do. And I left HP. I went to TaskUs, and I had this massive, massive organization, very cool opportunity there. And then I left TaskUs and I went to QSC, and I had a big function there, a smaller company but a big function. And this was still in the back of my mind, right? This is something I should be doing. This is where my passions lie. And then about a year and a half or so ago, I just hit that inflection point that I'm making a change in my career anyway. Why not bet on myself? Let's see if this is something that I can do. And so I started this company. I started the leadership studio, and it's been really interesting ride. Frustrating in the beginning because everyone, when they start a business, you want it to just be just amazing from day one, and gosh, I'm so awesome. Won't people just flock to me? And of course, that's not how it works. And you talked about AI, and it's funny. I was not even though I worked in tech for close to 30 years, I'm not a technologist. IT was never in my background. So coding, developing, any of those things, I was as far from those things as you could be and still be inside the tech environment. But the tools of the day are pretty easy to learn, especially if you're motivated and you don't want to pay anyone else to do it. The tools are
Right.
pretty easy to learn, and that's where all this came from because I just needed help to scale. The as my business started to move, as I started getting more people interested, I just needed the the kind of digital scale that AI can provide to me. So I got into it. I started building these tools, and I think the peak of all that is this tool we call Studio Coach, which is the thing that kind of helps people who are being coached in between sessions. It allows them to kind of interact with let's call it a digital person, right? And they can talk to them, get feedback. They can, if they have a big presentation they're going to give, they can record it and upload it. It provides feedback. So all those things are cool, right? I'm excited, but the fact of the matter is I couldn't run my business without AI these
So
days.
let's,
And
so let's we've covered so much. So let's go back. There's so many I want to go back to, but let's stick with the AI for a minute. So I've done some coaching, and I call myself an accountability coach, and then I personally would keep in touch and make sure they're doing their homework before we meet the next week. So break down the tools instead of skipping over them. Really break down the AI tools that you use with your coaching clients because you're doing this full time now, right?
I am, yeah, this is life these days. So, you know, we have
Yes.
we have three different core tools that we use, and they're in kind of very different aspects of what we do at the Leadership Studio. Because we do have, I'll start with the easiest one because we do have sort of a niche business, which is really around, we call it career services. But if you're looking to make a career change, if you're kind of trying to want to test the market, and you're one of these people who's most of us who's just hasn't updated their resume in a long time or hasn't looked at their LinkedIn from anything approaching an external lens, we do offer service to kind of coach people up, bring up the quality of their resume. We can tailor it to specific roles, but that takes a lot of time. And we built tools that do, the first thing we did was built a tool that just could analyze resumes. Give me feedback really, really quickly and faster than I can read it. And usually I can, they send me the resume, we can get on the phone, I can have the analysis instantly. But then it starts to get me down the path of where do we want to go with this, and we can build different tailored resumes, and I think that tool works pretty well. I think the proof of that is there's been a couple of people who were just kind of, they were crickets in terms of what the responses they were getting with the existing one, and we were able to tailor resume, and they started getting responses. And I think the ugly secret of the job market these days is these ATS systems, the automatic tracking systems that scan resumes and look for specific keywords. And so sometimes it doesn't matter how awesome you are, how great your
Right.
or relevant your experience is. If you don't have this word in this way, the system just puts you to the bottom of the
Great.
list.
It's terrible.
Figuring out how to kind of code past that. So the resume analyzer tool, it was the first one that we built that I would say was successful. And on the coaching side of the business, we have two tools that we use, and one we kind of use at the beginning of every engagement, and then one we use throughout the engagement. And one thing that I always really liked in various sessions around coaching and leadership and things in my own career was these kind of standardized assessments that would sort of tell you a little bit about yourself. So think like Myers-Briggs or a DISC or these sort of tools because I always found insight in that. Not that it maybe described me to a T, but it could highlight different things. And and I don't know if it was hubris or whatnot, but I wanted to build my own. And so I kind of started thinking about what are the archetypes that I think of when I think of kind of different leadership elements, and like a technician or a builder or strategist, this sort of thing. What are the different archetypes and what are the different aspects that go into that? So I started building the questions and how would like a self-assessment type thing that someone would take, and how would that get to, and very quickly I built a model that functioned, but it would take me just way too long to go through each one and kind of score it out. And so I started building the AI on top of that, so it can interpret what comes in, and then very quickly, more quickly than I can, creates the customized output. And that's what we do at the beginning of every coaching session. Not just because I think it adds maybe a little bit of authenticity to the conversation, because it allows people to very quickly engage and say, oh yes, this is this describes me in some way. One of the things I like about it is it says it'll describe where you likely feel energy or where you likely feel strength, and then maybe what are the types of situations where you don't. Where do you feel your confidence waning, that sort of thing. And so that piece, the assessment tool, I think is very cool. And we've had a few people want to kind of come back and take it after the fact, which I also think is interesting too, because the input is self-assessment. If the needle moves significantly, it means you think the needle moves significantly. So I think it's very interesting, like from a psychology side of it, the like what are the
Right.
output some of these sessions. And then the third tool, the biggest tool, which is the kind of, I would say it's the fully functional AI, because it's the one you can talk to, is Studio Coach. And so that's one that we built using OpenAI as the underlying platform, and trained it repeatedly on what are the methods and kind of tactics that I use in coaching, what are the terms that we use, and what are different ways that, like, what does good look like in certain situations and what does bad. And over time I felt like it was functional enough to be useful. And then of course we've refined it, and I would say it took a massive leap when OpenAI released GPT-5. So when they went from 4 to 5, this tool went from being pretty good to really good. And I felt like the feedback it was giving was, I didn't have to train it as much. Is probably a better way to say that. And then being able to add additional analysis type tool sets within there. And it's funny because one of my major criticisms of some of these GBT or large language model type tools is that they're too nice. They're supportive to the point of being effusive. You can do no wrong. Wow, great job. It's super great, thinking, and nothing wrong with being positive. I'm a real positive guy, but
Right.
that's not always great in coaching. And so one thing that I liked about Studio Coach is it's not mean or anything, but it's blunt. And it's if if something is steering wrong, or if there's an opportunity to truly be better, it will call direct attention to that, not beat around the bush. And again, the people that have really used it, versus just like on the first day everyone uses it, but the people that have
Right.
really used it sessions have been really, really happy. And then the kind of the wish list of features, that's how I know uses it, is that when they send me, what if it could do this, and they kind of hound me after, have you built that in yet, have you built that in yet? So that's always great for me.
So after someone takes the test, well, number one, can I take the test? I'd love to take the
Yeah,
test and have you.
yeah, yeah.
And and,
It's a
and can
free
other
assessment
people, if
on my
someone
website.
wanted to call you up and say, I'd like to take the test, do they have to work with you for a period of time, or could they call you and reach out and take this test?
Anyone can take it. I would encourage anyone to take it. It's free. It's online. So even if they don't want to talk to me, which I would understand, they can follow the link and go from there.
Great. And what is that link, just so we know?
It is directly on the webpage for the Leadership Studio, which is leadership-studio.com,
Okay.
and it's right for the top. Take our free assessment.
So it's interesting what you were just, I mean, the app, they sound amazing. I love ChatGPT and I'm on 5. and it really knows me. So I was listening to a woman speaking yesterday on YouTube, and she was going deeper on how to use it. I use it all the time, but she was going deeper on how to really personalize it. And so the question was, what are your blind spots? Talk about being a little blunt, right? You were just talking about being blunt, and AI does tend to be nice. And so I asked it, what were my blind spots? And I read something in your bio just now about people moving into leadership and really going into that and taking it by that hands. And so it said, I've been in real estate for 35 years. I've written 5 books. I have a podcast. I've done a lot of things, and I'm always trying to control and perfect. And I'm working on my 5th book right now, and I'm like, I just want it done to go out, but I'm still fine tuning it. And I just added 2 more examples into it. Anyway, my blind spots, it says, you are the expert. You just need to step up, and you don't need to keep practicing. You are there, and you just need to get out there. So what do you tell people like that who are micromanagers, control freaks, want to be perfect before they launch? How would you guide someone?
Yeah, so there's a few things in there that I'll react to. The first is I want everyone to be better and to strive to be better. I think just self-improvement or improvement over time, that should be the goal for all of us. But perfection is a really dangerous word, right? I think
Right,
that perfection in many things, and of course we put a very large premium on what we do at the Leadership Studio around how do you show up? How do you communicate? What signals are you giving out? And specifically in that area, perfection is largely unattainable
right,
because if you're a leader and like you give podcasts, I'm sure you give speeches, you know that every single one you do, you could be amazing, but if you looked at it in 6 months, you're going to find 2 or 3 things that maybe you wish you would have done differently, or even it was perfect, but now you know this one point lands harder, and
right,
therefore you would have wanted to go more on it. So it's not about whether you were good and bad in that moment. It's that just try to be better tomorrow than you were today. But perfection is dangerous because if the goal was perfection and you have any sort of mistake, you say an that you didn't want to say, or you flub a word or you mispronounce something, then it creates a spiral and it starts to create these little micro fractures in your confidence. But over time, those fractures become real fissures, right? And when your confidence starts to wane, now obviously you feel it, but so does your audience,
right.
and then you start to lose this connection with your audience. So that word perfection I think is very, very dangerous. But this other thing that you're describing, I think, is something that maybe we hear but we don't talk about enough, which is even when you're high performing, and maybe especially high performers, we tend to hesitate in moments. We're right at the edge. We know we can make that jump, but we saw someone fall, so maybe we don't want to do it. Or said differently, we believe we can make that jump, but who even wants us to? Right? Who wants me to make that jump? And so this whole notion of imposter syndrome, like
Mm,
why me? Why me right now? Am I the right person? Surely someone else been the better person. I think that's, to degrees, I think that's pervasive in high performing leaders who have humility. And hopefully high performing leaders have humility. But of course, some of us have met those that could use a little more perhaps. But
yeah,
imposter syndrome is something that I have dealt with in my career many times, and even I would say in current form, I I deal with it. Like as the whole AI thing. Why am I doing this? Is this going to be any good? If I put it out in the market, does anyone want it? Is it going to add any
right.
value? Like the types of questions that infect. And so I think when you ask like how do I coach this, the thing that gets me past those moments is when I'm feeling hesitation, is this the right moment to, and I just wrote a book last year, right? So the moment of, does anyone ever want to read this or hit publish or whatever, the same thing. So is this the right moment? I always think about my the journeys in my own career and the successes and things, and when did I feel maybe I'm not worthy, but someone put me there, someone promoted me, someone trusted me, and it feels to me like maybe like a break in this past trust if I don't trust myself as much as at least someone else did. And shame on me for not believing in myself as much as people who trusted me around. And so that's the kind of thing that helps me, and I would try to coach others, is when you are feeling like maybe this isn't the right moment, or like you said, you're the expert. Who knows better than you to do this? That
Well,
you need
AI
to.
told.
Yes. Oh, so let me say, when you're receiving feedback that says you're the expert, perhaps, like, then you should, trust. And I think faith is a big thing. Like, we should put faith in the world.
Mhm.
We should have faith in ourselves to be successful. And if something doesn't go the way we want in the very first moment or the first day or week or month, what can we learn from that? So rather than think, oh, shoot, this failed, and why did I do it? We should think about, maybe, why did it fail, or is failure even the right word?
Right.
Because stumbling blocks happen all the time, and how we get over, like, how do we pick ourselves up? You saw I have a young daughter, right? How do we pick ourselves up? How do we get over these things? Like, we need to continue those lessons in life, in adult life as well. Maybe it's not falling over a stair or something, but it's more meaningful as we kind of continue our career journeys.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to go to commercial break and we will be right back with Crispin Thompson from San Antonio, Texas, and the world.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like, it was almost instant. Like, I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical. Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorek, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorek has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk.
Welcome back to Mastering the Art of Success. I'm your host, Debbie DiMaggio. We are here with Crispin Thompson. So we were just talking about imposter syndrome. So I just want to go back to this. You've said many careers stall not because of lack of talent, but because strong managers are promoted without learning how to be seen as leaders. When did you first recognize that pattern? And how did you, in your coaching now, how do you help people through that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. There was a phase in my career at the beginning of my career where I think tech as an industry was moving very, very quickly. The mid '90s, everyone was buying everyone, and there was lots of growth, and you were kind of leading into Y2K, and it's just like massive, explosive growth. And I say all that because it meant that job change and promotions came easier, perhaps. Then it was easier to move, and I had a degree of success, and my promotions and my roles changed. And for sure, looking back on it, I believe that I achieved a level too quickly, because I couldn't see it at the moment. At the moment, it was just a confirmation of how awesome I was. And unfortunately, I believe that everyone else knew how awesome I thought I was. I think in that phase of my career, it was the whatever humility I project out now, I didn't have then. And so I see it now looking back that the way I was, how I acted, those kind of moments are the kind of things that I'm like reflexively embarrassed by when I think about it in the past. And and I was lucky that I had a mentor who cared enough about my future career to kind of aggressively get in my ear and say, "Listen, I don't think anyone wants to work with this guy," meaning me. And and so I kind of got through the defensive mechanism of obviously you're wrong, but and then kind of listened and watched because that I'm certain that if that conversation hadn't happened in that moment and me being able to hear it at that time, my career would have flamed out. I would not have gone any further, certainly not in any kind of fast trajectory, and I would have stalled. And so I say that because what I began to see was sometimes you see people promoted too quickly, and sometimes it's because they have all the potential in the world, and people want to see them kind of achieve. But for sure, when you look at kind of mid-size on upward, but especially in enterprise size companies, what happens is when you're promoted to certain levels, like say senior manager or executive type levels, there's a presumption, for better or for worse, but there's a presumption that whatever subject matter knowledge you brought in to kind of achieve that level also somehow translates into your ability to lead and manage, by the way. And I think that's not true. And I think that developing leaders is a grossly underfunded aspect at many companies, right? They'll talk about how promotions they've made and how they've grown people from this level to this level, but then you go and talk to those people, and if you get them in really honest conversations and say, "Do you feel like you have what it takes to be successful in your role?" Very few of them will will say yes, especially in the first couple of years after significant promotion. And so one thing that I try to coach to others is try to get them to first just tell me what you if someone can articulate where they think they're falling behind or where they maybe not even weak, but where do they feel less confident in kind of in their role, then that acknowledgement of where can I be better or where should I be better is the best first part of the conversation. And then if they're willing to say, and please help me, then it's even better, right? I had someone ask me some months back about what's the ideal level or whatever for someone that we coach, and I said I'm not sure there is an ideal level, but there is an ideal trait to the personalities, which is they ask for help. They're saying this is what I want to be better at. They can articulate that because whether they've just been promoted to people manager or whether they're a senior vice president, it doesn't matter, how big or small the role is. If they know what they want to be better at and they can articulate that, then they're ahead of many of their peers. And then they're way ahead of their peers who clearly need that help but don't think they do too, which is also something that we see. So I think there's a lot of words for me to say that I think introspection is what I try to coach here. Like look inside, know thyself, and I don't want people to be overly harsh, but I think we do need to take a critical eye and just be honest. Like what do you see others do that you admire that you don't see in yourself? Where do you feel confident versus lack of confidence? Where do you feel strength or not? And let's just start there so we can begin to build toward how do we make you the leader that you can be? The tagline we use a lot is we like to bridge potential to performance. So how do we get you from what you can be to how you're to performing in the way that you should be?
And do companies, I've always been an independent contractor, I've always worked on my own. So when you work in these big companies and you're moving from an executive to into a leadership role, are there courses people are obligated to take, or is there any training, or you're just like, okay, Crispin, I'm promoting you to the head of the department or CEO? Is there any kind of training, that formal training that goes on?
Obviously, there will be exceptions to this, but I would say in general, no or not enough. And in my career across multiple companies, I would say that if you, and this is kind of ironic, I think, because if you're tagged as someone who is like a high performer or high potential, then you're likely to be put into the program where they invest more dollars and you get more training, and that's great. It's great for those individuals, but maybe they're not the ones that need it urgently, right? Because if you're already seeing them as high performing and high, not that they don't need it, I think everyone needs,
Right.
but that's where the dollars go, and it starts to create, like a separation across talent pools, so that, and sometimes in great ways and sometimes in not. But the other side of this, and I think the most frustrating thing for people that go into those programs is what comes out of it. When there was a time at Hewlett Packard Enterprise, myself and 49 other executives were put into this program where they said, you guys are all going to be whatever level, and in so many years, but this program is going to cut that in half and accelerate it. And of the 50 of us that were there, there's not a lot even left for the company, and of the ones that are, very few of them have achieved that level within that time frame that's expired now. And so, and there's a million factors. It has nothing to do with the program, nothing to do with the people. There's always external factors, but the instant you as a company start to set expectations around timing, the clock has started. And if you can't hold up that end of the bargain, then it just creates disconnect, right? And then it becomes, oh, this thing you want me to do on top of all the other things I have to do for my job now doesn't feel like a good investment in your time. And how can we see good measurable results? So I'm always happy when a company calls me and says, we want to get better at this and we'd like you to help us, because then it tells me that they mean it and they want to be more invested. And then I want to make sure that they understand that this cannot be a 3-day workshop when they were done, or 6 weeks of virtual coaching and then we're done. There has to be pieces, and there has to be good measurements, like good baselines. And how do we show people that we know this was a good investment to them, not just the accountants at the company who always want to know that too.
So who are who are your clients? Who are the people that you work with in the leadership studio?
I think the sweet spot for me has been individuals that are newly promoted I say newly, like within, let's say, 18 to 24 months,
Mhm.
into executive levels. We have clients that are more seasoned, and we have some that are less seasoned, but I think the sweet spot is in that range, because those are the individuals that are feeling that piece where they're kind of out over their skis the most, and they have this new title that conveys extra responsibility or extra authority, but they're not feeling it in themselves. And I think that's the sweetest spot in terms of where we have been able to affect change, I think, the most.
And they've been in the job, so they now are living it and experiencing it, and then they know, like, wait, I still need to learn something, or how can I improve now upon what I'm already doing? So what are 5 traits of a good leader?
So I think, again, we put a lot of premium on how we show up, and so I think about things like authenticity. I want, as a way to describe leaders, 2 words, 2 traits. I think of being genuine and being authentic. I think for sure those are always words that I enjoyed hearing from surveys and things about me, because it felt like if that's what I was trying to do, and people were recognizing it, then I'm at least hitting somewhere close to the mark. So I think, authenticity, be who you are, genuine, mean what you say. I think those 2 things go a long way. And I think what's also interesting about that is the opposite is dangerous, right? If you're a leader and you've got an organization of 5 or 500, right? If you're trying to be something that you aren't, or try to act in a way that you aren't, or you have to deliver messages that you yourself, aren't fully invested in, they're going to know. Your audience will know, and it starts to create this disconnect between, what do I want to do, and how do we achieve that together? I think there's a notion of community that I really like as a trait from leaders, and I think my own life tells me that this is it's a hard line to manage, right? Because if you want to be a leader who wants to be authentic and genuine and connected, it's a hard line, right? Because how do you create connections with your team, with your colleagues, with your peers, without becoming like friendly to the point that you don't feel like you can deliver harsh or constructive feedback, right? How do you do that? So I think creating good sense of community, and how does the team know that you care? I think you have to engage. You have to be willing to talk to your people. And again, I'm talking sideways and down in the organization. I'll talk about upwards here in a second. But you know, creating the sense of community. And I think the way I think about all this is that it's this notion of we're in this together. And whether the company is going fantastic and everything is just going gangbusters and all the numbers are pointing up, or it's the other thing, I think it's important for everyone to realize that we're in this together, and that you as leaders are able to show your team kind of where's your contribution. Because it may be that you're like at HPE, I was running a big organization that had a set of functions that were way past revenue. But how do we show that piece was still relevant to continue driving of revenue or impacts to margins, that sort of thing. So helping people kind of see their impacts. The Now the other side of this is we talk about presence, executive presence, and so if the first three things were kind of about kind of talking, horizontally or down to your organization, I think the other attributes have to do with how do you be seen, how do you make yourself be seen to your own management, your own leadership, right? I think this, and so that's kind of like creating confidence. And how do you there's a lot about tailoring of messages. I talk about things like, one tool we use is something that I've always called parent test. So when you I was in strategy, like I said, for about a third of my career. And when you have a strategy role, you don't make anything, you don't sell anything, you don't fix anything. And you have parents that hopefully love you and support you and to be successful, and they want to hear about what you do. But how do you explain? I talk about what we could do or what we might do or how we might do it. That's not an easy conversation to have. And so I started thinking about how can I talk through analogy or metaphor or comparisons and just find common ground. And what I have found in my career is that this notion of the parent test, meaning could I explain this concept to someone who is not invested in the day-to-day life of what I do in the way that they could understand it enough to say yes or no, then that's a great test for presenting upwards to senior executives, because they have a much bigger scope than I do. They don't have the time or inclination to know every detail that I or my team knows. Therefore, I shouldn't try to burden them with all of that knowledge. I should try to give them just enough that they feel confident that we're doing what we need to do, or they can say yes or no. And so this kind of like, how do we create confidence and shift it upwards? In the piece of kind of like executive presence. And I think the fifth piece would be around emotional intelligence. And I save that for last because it's a good segue to talk about my book as well. But emotional intelligence is, and this works whether you're talking to a senior executive or talking to the most junior person in your organization. This is the kind of creating an empathetic link and kind of understanding the impacts. It's acknowledging that outside of everything we have going on, there's other things going on. And how do we continue to be human in environments that increasingly premiums on speed and efficiency and automation? Because at least for now, we're not all robots, and we have to kind of manage our way through. And so I think those are, as a kind of a way to round that out. That's how I think about kind of core traits of good leaders.
No, that's great. And it's so interesting because it's very similar to what anyone does with the service product or brand or in real estate
Mhm.
or most, community and authenticity I talk about all the time, and collaboration, and just community is so important. So we're going to go to your book in 1 second. We don't have a lot of time. So just some quick
Sure.
answers. I want to travel with you right now. You've led multicultural teams across Mexico, Poland, Romania, India, and the US. What's one leadership mistake you made early on that taught you the importance of cultural nuance?
Oh, I think super early on, just understanding the ways that I would create connections with audiences in the U.S. was often with humor. And humor, I had to learn the hard way, is hyper local. And
Good.
what is funny or relevant or could translate just doesn't. And it doesn't matter how good someone's English is. Word usage can
Yes.
vary very differently. And so what I had to think about was, how do I make myself more clear in speech? How do I get away from idiom? How do I get away from certainly word based humor?
Hmm.
Or if I do feel comfortable explaining why it's supposed to be funny.
Right.
And I think the my travels let me listen, I think really well, and try to listen for intent versus the specific words. I think that was a huge learning for me, is just make myself more clear so that I can connect with the audience. Because if they don't understand me, then they're going to say yes because they knew I wanted to say yes, but we're
Yeah.
still not going to get done what I wanted to get done.
Right. I love it. That is so true. Many companies unintentionally center leadership development at headquarters. What happens to trust, morale, and talent when global teams feel overlooked?
Well, I'll tell you, it shows up first in employee surveys, right? It'll start to rank these things, and and then what happens is, often when, and that was at the end of my career at HPE, I had no employees in the U.S. All of my employees were elsewhere, and when big companies expand into other places, they're doing it because the talent pools are rich. They're doing it for a lot of reasons, but often those locations are in hyper growth. And for sure, if a location, a team, an individual feels like I'm not close to headquarters and I'm being ignored, they're just going to go to the place where they don't feel ignored. And, we would see locations where they wouldn't have to change their parking spot. They would just go one floor up or one floor down in the same building, and they would be at a competitor or some other company that, and so you've got to actively fight against that to make sure that you're not over rotating toward just the people I can see or the people I'm going to develop.
Right. That's true. It's so true. And it's hard as and well, you can answer the question. How do you do that when you're at the top, or you're one of the people at the top, and you're trying to keep engaged with a huge company, let alone just even a company with 50 people? But what if you have thousands? How do you do that? Is there some magic?
There's no magic, but you have to try to actively create connections. And so for me, that would be, at a minimum, every month we would allow the whole team to come together. We could talk about how we're doing and let people ask questions and be prepared to take questions. And then, for me, didn't matter how big the organization was, I would do so many kind of roundtables where you just randomly pick some people across teams and invite them, and it was never going to be more than maybe 1 to 12 ratio, me to 12 people kind of thing. So people feel comfortable enough that they can ask questions, let people know that there's no question you can't ask, and then mean that, by the way, so that if someone asks a question, you have to be prepared to answer it to the best of your ability. But I think you've got to create those connections, and I think and it's not easy. It's not like you're going to get on a plane. This is going to be Zoom or Teams or something, right? And I think the simplest thing is, if you ask someone, how are you doing, or how was your day, you should mean that question and then listen for the response.
Right. Absolutely. I love it. Okay, tell us about your book.
So it's interesting because we talked about AI so much, but the book is titled "The Human Advantage: Emotional Intelligence in the Age of AI," right? And what's interesting is, it didn't even start for me as a book. I didn't start this as I want to write a book. I started it as, I know that I can coach, or I can even certify people along the avenue of emotional intelligence, but I kind of felt like, especially if a company came to me tomorrow and said, we want you to come do this, that I was exposed because I hadn't taken the time to build the material. I had talked about it for maybe a decade, but I just wanted to start to kind of collect my thoughts and pull things together. And as I was doing that, I love historical references and things. I wanted to go and find ways to kind of tell the story. But as I was doing this, I felt there's enough material here that certainly leaders might find it as a good handbook to think about just different aspects. And there's so much pressure right now in companies to be faster, do more. AI is going to come take all these jobs, so just stop thinking about it, kind of thing. And it's just not real today. Maybe it is tomorrow, but it's not real yet. And it's, my worry was that it was going to create this disconnect. So as I got all this together, I said, well, let's see if we can convince anyone to buy my book and kind of pull it together. And I think this notion of emotional intelligence is so important, and I think it's especially for leaders that are in some way related to technology. I think it's very important to not forget that you have a role to play as a person, as a human, as a something with a soul that no amount of studio coaches or other AI tools out there can kind of compensate for. And so that's really the gist of the book. It's just kind of a primer on the things we need to be thinking about as leaders in technology, kind of uh, heavy world that we live in these days.
Absolutely. And how do we get your book?
Today, it's available on Amazon, and whether it's in paperback or ebook, and in about 14 days, it'll be available on other places that you can buy ebooks and paperback. But I had exclusivity with Amazon for the first period. So,
Awesome. So, what would you tell your younger self when you were just starting out in business?
it's interesting. I think one thing that I'm going to talk slightly out of both sides of my mouth, because one thing I do firmly believe in is that I don't like to live in the past, because we are a product of our experiences, and I don't hate who I am today. Therefore, there's nothing that I would necessarily change. That being said, I think the a couple of pieces of advice that I would have given, early 20s Chris, would be ask questions. Like, when I remember distinctly being in meetings in like 1999 where I'd be in the meeting and the guy next to me had the same role as me and he was 20 years older than me. And instead of me thinking, how did he build this career? How did he be successful in corporate America? I was thinking, gosh, I could be his kid and I've got the same job, and it's just a terrible, terrible way to think. And so I would coach myself to say, you know, ask more questions about how did people get to an answer? Like, listen to not just what their response was, but maybe how did they get there? Ask them questions about, what do you like about the role you're in, or what you admire about leaders around you, so that I could have formed maybe a broader view of how things could be versus just me being a jerk at the time.
Right. I love it. That's so true. I know I always go back, well, I like where I got, and I wouldn't have gotten here if I hadn't gone through everything I went through. So it is, I understand talking out of both sides. You're like, or we could have done this way. Thank you so much, Chris. This was really wonderful. So excited to know you and to read your book. And what's the best way for people to get a hold of you for coaching? Let us know.
Yeah, I think the two simple ways. So go to leadership-studio.com. I think it's the simplest way. There's, you can click on the connect now little thing that pops up, or find me or the company on LinkedIn. I think those are the easiest ways. And I would say it's probably like 70-30 via LinkedIn is how most things come in. But we'll take any and all. Or you can reach out to me directly on email, which would be Crispin at leadership-studio.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. I am going to go on your website now and ask to take that test.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Tune in each week for another episode of Mastering the Art of Success with host Debbie DiMaggio. Thursdays, 2 p.m. Eastern. Real stories, real strategies, real success.